Okay, Rebecca Ellis, you have a question for the mayor?
Rebecca, OPB.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Mayor Wheeler. Yeah, it's on a similar topic. I know you had sent a memo with sort of 3 questions to, I believe, PPB and BOEC about call response times. And I know you got back. It was kind of like 3 short paragraphs responding to each question. Is the analysis on call response times, is that something different that you've asked for from both bureaus?
I am asking for more specific information. What I'm trying to do is back into 2 things. Number one, what is the standard of call response, particularly for high priority calls? How far off are we from meeting it? And it may be a shift by shift basis, a day by day basis, or it may be based on certain criminal activity. That's part of what I want to understand. And it also gets us to the question of whether or not we are appropriately deploying our limited first responder resources to the highest priority calls. And I believe there's already been some issues identified where individuals are perhaps making decisions they are not authorized to make about whether or not calls should be responded to. My belief is that as much as possible, we should make sure that high priority calls are all responded to, or that at least there is some feedback to the people who made the calls to explain what's going on. So that's my top priority.
And you haven't received this analysis yet, correct?
I have not received the final draft, and more importantly than that, I want to sit down with the chief and the director of emergency communications to get their specific feedback in terms of what's going on. I also have a strong partner in Mingus Maps. I assigned him the Bureau of Emergency Communications recently, and he is as eager as I am to get to the bottom of this and make sure that we're responding effectively to those high priority calls.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Questions?
And just to be clear, I believe my team has that final draft of the report. I have not yet had the chance to read it and absorb it.
Thank you, Rebecca. Nigel Jaquez.
Yeah, Mayor Wheeler, good morning.
Morning.
Switching topics to the proposed carbon taxes that were made public in late November. In its public comments, the PBA called those policies one of the worst pieces of proposed policy that City Hall's released in many years, and have essentially asserted that you and your bureau chief didn't do their homework or your homework. Could you respond to that criticism and to the criticism that you didn't do homework, didn't consult affected parties?
Yeah, well, they oppose it because some of their members would be required to pay additional fees to compensate for the carbon that they're emitting into the local atmosphere. So let's take a step back. Here's what I did. About a year ago, I asked our Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, Andrea Durbin, who's the director, I asked them to come up specifically with an air quality program for the city of Portland. Believe it or not, even though we're in this incredible environment here in the city of Portland, our air quality is actually quite poor. And I want to do something about that to improve the air quality. So I asked Director Durbin and her team if they could come up with a strategy to create an air quality program. I put a couple of criteria on the table. Number one, I wanted the program to be sustainable, and that includes sustainably funded. And I wanted to make sure that those who are contributing disproportionately to the carbon emissions in our community would pay the most towards supporting that air quality program. They did a considerable amount of work internally. They came back to me with a proposal. The world has changed in that year. A number of the employers that would be impacted by increased fees are already struggling under the economic ramifications of COVID. I'm keenly aware of that. I am still 100% committed to clean air. I'm still 100% committed to an air quality program. But it may make sense for us to hold off on the increased fee, at least in the near term, until we get through some of the economic fallout from COVID. But to be clear, I have not backed off at all on my commitment to air quality. I have not backed off on my commitment to the program. The program has just recently gone out for public comment. And we're fairly early in the process. There is still an opportunity to shape the program based on the feedback that we have solicited from the Portland Business Alliance and from others in the community. But for them to suggest, though, that we haven't done our homework because they weren't there from day one is ridiculous. We have a process that engages the community. That engagement process includes putting the policy out for comment, and I've invited their comment. I've met with the Portland Business Alliance and their leadership on numerous occasions now, and I've expressed to them that we're not doing anything at this particular moment except soliciting feedback and information, and I pledged to them and many others that we would continue to take their input into account, we would evaluate it, and when the timing is right, we will have an air quality program that makes sense. But my level of commitment to that hasn't shifted at all.
So when will we see this come to council for a vote?
I don't have a specific date yet. And as you know, the Bureau Plan and Sustainability reports to Commissioner Hardesty. I will obviously want to work in alignment with Commissioner Hardesty and my colleagues on the Portland City Council. I have a new council. They would like to be fully apprised of what the public feedback is and what potential modifications, if any, would be made to the program. They, I believe, understand the urgency of air quality and having a viable air quality program in the city of Portland, and they want to participate in helping to shape it. So what I'd ask everybody, the PBA, everybody else, is let's take a deep breath. We're still at the public engagement, the public input part. Let's work together and see if, first of all, we all agree that air quality is an issue, and I hope we all do agree on that. And number two, if this particular program that we've put out for public input needs to be tweaked, I'm certainly open to tweaking it as long as it remains a viable and effective program. And I still believe fundamentally that those who disproportionately add carbon emissions to our atmosphere should pay disproportionately into the sustainability of that program.
Thank you, Nigel. Did you have a follow-up? I'm sorry.
I just want to say, Mayor, it was clear that when this policy was released November 20th, when the Oregonian first wrote about it, there was that Durbin and others hoped for a vote last year. So I'm having a hard time understanding how you can say it was only put out for discussion when it was clear that it was aimed for a vote in 2020 until you pushed it.
We just opened the public comment period recently. I want to say it was within the last month or so. We gave adequate time. I even extended that time at the request of the Portland Business Alliance, just as we could have gone as early as November with the public comment period. The public comment period then would have overlapped with the holidays. I got feedback from the Portland Business Alliance that they didn't think it was acceptable that public comment period would be during the holidays. They felt people would not have the opportunity to participate in an effective way, so we extended it. So I feel like I have been very flexible in terms of trying to engage and allow for public input, to allow my colleagues to have an opportunity to both shape the program as well as claim co-ownership of the program. I'm not pushing anybody into anything, but what I am saying is this: we have an air quality problem in the city of Portland. We need to have a clear and viable air quality program. It needs to be sustainably funded, and I continue to believe, just as a value, that those who disproportionately impact the quality of our air in this city should disproportionately pay for the program.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nigel. Lisa Balick, Coin TV. Lisa, you have a question? Your hand's up.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Mayor.
Morning.
As far as downtown Portland, between the boards up and not going away on businesses that are fearful of more violence, the proliferation of tent camps on the sidewalk and other property downtown, how realistic is it that downtown is going to bounce back anytime soon?
Well, there was a study that was released just this week that showed that foot traffic is down 80%. And that's largely based on COVID. So until we get our arms around the COVID crisis, downtown will not bounce back. And I want to be clear, this isn't just a downtown story. This is also the case throughout our neighborhood business districts and our industrial areas as well. So number one, we have to make sure that we get the vaccinations out, that COVID is addressed. I've also been very clear that my top 3 priorities in this second term are safety, homelessness, and livability, all of which impact people's feelings about safety downtown, as well as throughout the neighborhood business districts and the industrial areas. And I'm going to continue to focus on programming to address those issues. I'm going to continue to work with our community partners, which include not only the employers, but also the neighborhood associations, the business district associations, the industrial district associations, and others throughout the community who are concerned about the speed with which we need to come back economically. And I share that urgency.
But I guess the likelihood of people who don't work downtown and would be going down there for other reasons are not coming down, not necessarily because of the COVID issue, but the other 2 issues.
Well, there's lots of issues. I'm sitting in City Hall, and I think there are 4 people in City Hall today. I'm across the street from the Pac West Center, and I don't know that there's anybody in the Pac West Center today. Most of the office buildings around me are completely vacant, and that's because we're still in the throes of a COVID crisis. But that does not mean we don't have homeless, safety, and livability issues that we also need to address. I'm keenly aware of that. Particularly on the homeless front, we've been extremely innovative. I called for 300 additional shelter beds. We opened 365, extending and exceeding that goal. The Metro Supportive Housing Services Bond was passed, which doubles the amount of resource available for things like mental health and substance abuse safety net services. We have purchased with our regional partners 6 motels for older adults and other people who are highly susceptible to COVID. We've opened alternative campsites. We've invested in heated pods in our outdoor managed camps. We just this week issued 2 new requests for proposals, one around safe parking sites and the other around community groups working with us to establish alternative shelter sites. So we're trying to be flexible. We're trying to be innovative. We want to be compassionate towards those who are on the street. But we also, as I've said, we need this FEMA-like response where we do everything we can with all of our regional partners and other institutions. We want to continue to be innovative in terms of our solution. And we want to make sure that we do everything we can to get people as quickly and humanely off the streets as possible.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Let's see, Maggie Vespa, KGW. Your hand is up. You're next.
Hi, yeah, this timing is actually perfect. Mr. Mayor, you just listed the sort of innovations that your administration, you say, has been responsible for amid the housing crisis. I wanted to ask you a question about a comment that you made a little while ago at one of these availabilities. It was a couple of weeks before the November election, and you called it yourself a moonshot. You asked what it would take for government agencies across the metro area, in conjunction with the private sector, to build 5,000 units of affordable housing in 3 years, which, as you know, would be hugely transformative. And your opponent in the election kind of accused you of throwing that out as a bit of an empty stunt to get reelected. And we heard similar suspicions from advocates and from citizens. So my question is tied to those actual affordable housing units. Have you made any tangible progress in pursuing that, even if it was a moonshot? Because that was a big statement to make. If so, what is that progress? And can you tell us about
Yeah,
it?
so first of all, I want to be clear, the context in which I made that statement. At the time, I was very clear. I was not supporting a specific policy. What I was doing was giving an example that when all levels of government, from the state to the county to the local government, when we are focused on a specific issue and we focus our resources on those issues, we actually make good progress. And I will give you a specific example. When the county and the city and our regional partners work to get homeless families with children off the streets, or alternatively, when we worked to get veterans off the streets, And we had identified resources from the federal, from the state, from the county and local government, and we focused specifically on that population. We made extremely good progress. What I was suggesting in that press conference was, look, if we're 25,000 units of housing short, to make real progress here, what we're going to need to do is focus. And so that's where I said, what would happen if we were able to focus all of our energy on a specific goal for a specific purpose, and all levels of government were aligned with our prioritization and our resources, think about what we could get done. That was my point at the time. We are making good progress with affordable housing units. In fact, under my leadership, the Housing Bureau generated the most affordable housing it ever has. And in fact, the largest, I believe, in the history of the city of Portland. We passed 2 housing measures. We passed the supportive services measure as a region, and I was very active in that campaign. And the bottom line is, we're going to have to work on all of those things. I hope I'm not. There are times when I think it is important as the mayor for me to suggest visions or to inspire us to work together better, our state, our region, our county, our local government. And that was one of those times, and it still is. And the types of innovations that we're working on around homelessness, this isn't just the city of Portland. We're working with our metro regional government. We're working with our partners on the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners, the county chair, Deborah Kafori, the Joint Office of Homeless Services. This is an all hands on deck approach. It's focused, the goal being to get as many people as quickly and humanely as possible off of our streets and into better situations. And that, in my opinion, is the kind of leadership the public expects from me. And that's the kind of leadership I expect to provide.
Understood. But just as a follow-up, I mean, you threw that out as a specific goal at a press conference, and you're obviously in a unique position to galvanize people around it. Like, have you called other agency leaders? Have you set up meetings about, is this goal not being specifically pursued?
Constantly. But no, look, I did not, in fact, I was very specific in follow-up to that I was not espousing a specific policy. That was an example. It was a rhetorical example of what we can do when we work together. And there are other areas where I'm loath to say it because I don't want to be misquoted, but we also need to rebuild the mental health safety net in this state. And that's the state, that's the county, that's the city of Portland working with private nonprofit partners to rebuild that safety net. And I'm not espousing this as a specific policy, but wouldn't it be grand if we had something closer to on-demand substance abuse treatment in this city and in this state, the way other countries do? Maybe we would not have so many of the social issues that we're seeing on the streets of this city. But in terms of a specific policy, I am the mayor in a weak mayor form of government in one jurisdiction in a large state. And for us to be able to realize these grand visions, it requires something that we don't always do very well in this state, and that's collaborate. That's work together, from the federal officers to the state leaders, to our county leaders, to our city leaders. All of us need to work together and include the private sector, the philanthropic, and the nonprofit sectors in order to bring these grand visions to fruition. What I'm hearing more than anything else is people want action, and I want action, but I can't do it all alone, obviously.
Thank you, Maggie. Jim Redden with the Tribune. Jim, you have a question for the mayor?
Thank you very much. What is the process for reimagining policing going forward, and what is the strategy for making sure the Portland Police Association is involved with that?
Yeah, thank you. So I communicate regularly with Brent Hunsaker, who is the Brian Hunsaker, who is the head of the Portland Police Association. My phone line is always available to him, and vice versa. And I'm actually very pleased with the frequency and the openness of the communications we have had. We are, of course, also working in the context of collective bargaining, and we're in that process now. I have engaged the entirety of the Portland City Council, both on collective bargaining, as well as the next steps around police reform. I want to make sure that we have adequate policing and adequate resources, and I want to make sure that the police bureau does their work the right way that is reflective of the community's demands, in particular around racial justice and equity and around accountability and oversight. The council's taken many steps together in recent weeks since the murder of George Floyd to bring some of that to fruition. With regard to the next steps, I am in conversations with my colleagues right now about a unified path to bring into the city of Portland all of the different community-led efforts that have been generating proposals for the Portland Police Bureau. We will bring those in-house. We will collaboratively, as a city council, work to prioritize those issues and work them into our budget, as well as creating a timeline for implementation. So that is the next steps. We're working with a broad array of individuals internally, including Tom Reinhart, who's the Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Portland. I'm working specifically with my colleagues on the City Council around a community engagement piece. And we're not only working just on the police reform issue, we're also working on some of the other issues like the increase in gun violence in our community. So the watchword there, that was a long-winded answer. It's about collaboration and inclusion.
All right, thank you, Jim. If you don't have a follow-up, how about Genevieve Rayom?
Good morning.
Genevieve?
Good morning. Sorry, I was getting off mute there. Thanks for taking these questions, Mayor Wheeler. We appreciate it. I wanted to start with a question about the gun violence reduction team. There has been words that you are planning to reinstate this team. If so, how would it be different? Because as we know, the team was disbanded at the request of the community.
So that is correct, that GVRT was disbanded at the overwhelming request of the community, particularly at the height of the BLM movement here in the city of Portland. The concern that the community expressed was that the way that GVRT was operating, particularly in the Black community, was disproportionately policing Black men. What we're doing already is identifying strategies both through increased funding of the Office of Violence Prevention that can help prevent gun violence. Gun violence works the same as a virus. That has been proven time and time again. So like a virus, it can be prevented. You can check the spread of gun violence because of the way that it works. It's a shooting and then it's retaliation, and that leads to more shootings and more retaliation. So the Office of Violence Prevention works on the front end of that to try and prevent further shootings from taking place. Within the police bureau, they've already assigned a sergeant. They've assigned additional officers. They have increased the investigative capacity to make sure that every shooting in the city gets the attention that it deserves. The police chief has also suggested other ideas on how we increase our effectiveness. That includes more community oversight and more transparent reporting of data back to the community. I myself have personally engaged with federal, state, county, and local law enforcement to talk about a unified strategy around gun violence and how we're going to reduce it. So there's really these two pieces. There's the non-policing prevention side, the community side, and then there is the law enforcement side around making sure that we follow up, that we investigate, that we do everything we can to stop the spread of violence from a public safety perspective.
So in short, you are looking to reinstate this team.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear that.
So in short, you are looking to reinstate this team?
No, in short, I'm not. What we will do, first of all, GVRT is gone. It is dead. It is kaput. Now the question is, what replaces it? And what will replace it will have more prevention focus. It will have more community engagement focus, and it will have support of the community. And there will be more reporting back to the community in terms of the data that we'll be providing. So I'm not only working with law enforcement, we're engaging the local public safety coordinating council, which includes not only law enforcement, but also public health officials, probation and parole officers, and others who engage directly with the impacted community. And the early conversations around this have been very promising. It won't be easy to formulate specific strategies. It will take some time. There will be additional resources required, but the conversations that are ongoing right now are, I think, very fruitful.
Okay, and then another question, just switching topics here. When we talked about 2 weeks ago, you laid out your plans to cut down on violence in the city, particularly the small groups you said are behind these crimes. We've had several of these incidents since. We saw it on Inauguration Day. Groups advertised about the meeting. There were flyers around town. Why aren't police intervening, or were you pleased with the way police did react to the situation?
I'm sorry. For some reason, your voice is a little garbled. Tim, did you catch that?
Yeah, were you?
I can ask it again.
Yeah. Was he pleased with the police action around Inauguration Day? Was that your question?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a little better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I'm not sure what's happening, but I'll just try and talk slower. When we talked 2 weeks ago, you laid out your plans to cut down on violence in the city by those small groups. We've seen a few of those incidents since we last talked, including on Inauguration Day. We know in some cases these groups are advertising about their meetings. They put up flyers around town. Why aren't police intervening, and what do you think about police response thus far?
Oh, thank you very much. So I was very pleased with the police response on Inauguration Day. They were able to make good identifications of people who were engaged in criminal destruction and violence. They were able to make quick arrests. They were able to refer those arrests to the district attorney. The district attorney felt that in several cases they had strong evidence to back those arrests, and the district attorney will prosecute. That's, as I've been saying all along, number one, that criminal destruction and violence is unacceptable. Number two, I want to call them out for who they are. They're largely young to middle-aged white men who are often co-opting other movements. You don't get a free pass when you ransack a business and then spray paint BLM on it. That does not give you a free pass, and it does not justify or validate the destruction that you were engaged in. And I have been saying repeatedly, the way that you stop this is you hold people accountable and responsible for their acts of criminal destruction and violence. You prosecute them and you hold them accountable. I have further said that it would be my wish to engage restorative justice. I'm not sure for some of these folks throwing them in the slammer for a day or two is really going to make any impression at all. But I think what will make an impression is if they are forced to meet with the small business owners and operators and their employees to hear the social and the economic consequences of their actions. I think a lot of these young men really don't draw a line between their actions and the impact that they are having on people who are really struggling to get by during the economic consequences of COVID. They need to see it, and they need to see it with clarity. And so more arrests, more prosecutions, holding people accountable, and restorative justice that helps them better understand the poor choices that they are making. I don't want these guys to go on, particularly the young ones, the kids involved in this. I think we can turn them pretty quickly. The middle-aged guys, I don't even know what to say about them. I can't even get into their heads, but we do need to hold them accountable. I was proud of the police response on Inauguration Night. But let's also be honest. We had a couple of things going in our favor, including the fact that the criminal destruction happened in broad daylight, and therefore it was easier to make identifications. That we're not always that lucky.
And Mayor Wheeler, one last question in addition to this. You have said that you were hoping to...
Genevieve, I'm
sorry, I can't hear. There's too many people. Let her, she can do one more, and then we can be done.
We've got, okay, we're just about running out of time here. So
Okay, someone else can ask a question.
All right, I appreciate that because we are running out of time very quickly here. Shane Dixon, Kavanaugh.
Hi, Shane.
Hi, good morning, Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. And also my internet cut out briefly, so I'm sorry if this question had already been asked, but sort of on the topic of protest-related criminal activity, just in your view, overall, big picture here, do you feel that the Multnomah County District Attorney's policy toward protest-related prosecutions have been effective in addressing the most extreme acts, particularly around property destruction and violence?
It's too soon to tell. I have made my preference crystal clear that I believe that the way you stop these acts of criminal destruction and violence, and I want to very clearly differentiate that from nonviolent and peaceful demonstration. I support people's First Amendment rights to assembly and free speech and peaceful demonstration, nonviolent. But I will never support acts of criminal destruction and violence. That is not how we make political points in the United States of America. And we actually, unfortunately, are seeing this growing trend towards people saying that if you don't agree with me politically, we're going to come after you, either physically, or we're going to come after your home, or we're going to come after your place of business. That is unacceptable. It will never be acceptable to me. Was there more to your question, Shane?
Well, I think the other thing I wanted to ask was just in terms of the last 8 or 9 months of protest activity in the city of Portland, would you have liked or would you have preferred to have seen more prosecutions during this time?
So more good prosecutions, and this is a give and take. And I've met many times with Mike Schmidt. He's been very engaged with me, not only on these activities, he's also been very engaged and a willing partner around helping us reduce gun violence. He's also made clear to me that in order to make a prosecution, he needs good evidence. So I'm not prepared to dump this all in his lap and say he needs to do a better job of prosecution. We also have a role to play. We not only make arrests through the Portland Police Bureau, but we are responsible for giving the district attorney good information so that he can prosecute the case. It's not to the district attorney's advantage to take a case to court with poor evidentiary backing. And so we've actually worked really well together, the district attorney and the police bureau, to better understand what the DA needs in order to be able to make prosecutions. At the end of the day, just taking somebody to court is not satisfactory. If they are truly the ones engaged in perpetrating violence or criminal destruction, then we need to provide good evidence, and the district attorney needs to take that evidence to court and relentlessly advocate for those individuals being held accountable. And that's the plan.
So are you saying that it's been
Too soon to tell.
But it's so you're saying that prosecutorial discretion has had little or nothing to do with the outcomes of these cases to date so far?
I'm not in a position to be able to say yes or no at this point. A number of the cases have just literally gotten to the point where charges are being filed. I know everybody, myself, perhaps more than anybody else in this community, would love to see quick prosecutions. It doesn't work that way in the real world. You have to do the investigative follow-up. You have to interview witnesses. You have to review videotape. There are often attorneys, defense attorneys, and others that are involved. It takes time. And a lot of the cases that the district attorney is bringing are in what I would describe as the pending phase. It's too soon for me to be able to make that judgment. If I believe that the district attorney is not doing his level best to prosecute cases that I believe should be prosecuted, believe you me, I will tell you.
Final question, Mayor, on that topic. Has it surprised you that 9 out of 10 criminal cases that have been brought from protests to the DA's office have either been dropped or not pursued? I mean, that's 90%. Has that surprised you?
It seems like a high percentage, but again, the question is why. And for me, the question is really an internal one about whether or not he had sufficient evidence to be able to bring those cases. If he did not have sufficient evidence, then it's on us or on our investigative resources to provide that evidence. If, on the other hand, we provided good, solid evidence and he chose not to prosecute, I would very much oppose that. I believe it is very important in order to break this cycle of criminal destruction and violence for us to hold those individuals accountable who are engaged in it, arrest them, do the investigative follow-up, prosecute them, and have them feel the pain of the poor choices that they have perpetrated upon all of us in this community who are sick and tired of people, predominantly middle-aged to young white men, rampaging through the city for no apparent reason. They can't even articulate why they're doing it. But if you listen to their live feeds, it's obvious they think it's fun. That's not fun for the rest of us, particularly those small business owners and operators and their employees who end up picking up the social and the economic consequences of their actions. So I have said it, and I will say it again. I do not support criminal destruction and violence from the far right, and I do not support criminal destruction and violence from the far left. It is unacceptable, and people who are engaged in it should be arrested, and they should be prosecuted. They should be held accountable for their actions. And I'm not going to shift my thinking on that.
Okay, thank you, Shane. Shane, we're up against it. We have a meeting coming up in 5 minutes, another one. So I appreciate everybody being here and your patience. Alex and Sarah, we didn't get to your questions. Please circle back to me if there's anything we can fill you in on.
They need follow-up, we can give follow-up.
Yeah.
I'll just try and knock them out one, too. They sat here and we had all the technical glitches and everything else.
Okay. All right. Alex Zielinski then.
Hi, Alex.
Because we very
Good
limited
morning.
time.
Hey, thank you for making time. So my original question was already answered and asked, but I just wanted to kind of ask a question a little bit out of left field. We've received a few tips that you may have pepper sprayed someone last night. Is there any validity to that allegation?
If there is, there will be a statement later. I can tell you there was an incident. I filed a police report, and that's all I can tell you right now.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sarah Hurwitz?
Hello, good morning. Thank you.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, thank you so much for making time. Okay, I'll be quick. So returning to the growing homeless issue that you've talked about here in this press conference, you did mention collaboration. This requires flexibility. The one thing that I'm curious about with this is how do you safely get, okay, aside from affordable housing, right? But shelters, how do you safely get people into these during the pandemic? You know, I've talked to, some leaders working in this, and it's like, well, we have to social distance, you're not able to get as many people into these shelters, as before. So I'm wondering, has the convention center been considered? Are there other spots that you may be considering to help in that regard?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And the conundrum is real. This is a real thing that you're identifying. We do have to concern ourselves with social distancing, physical distancing. We have to concern ourselves with the spread of COVID. That definitely has reduced our capacity in our traditional shelters. That's one of the reasons why we shifted during the COVID crisis to having city and county sponsored sites throughout the city of Portland. We've hardened those sites with the additional pods. We've purchased motels for the first time that I am aware of in the history of the city. We have these 2 new RFPs out, one for new alternative shelter sites, another RFP for safe car camping sites. We're trying to be nimble and responsive to the reality that we're still operating within a COVID crisis. Now, that having been said, the managed camps and the alternative camps and even the shelter sites that we've opened are all superior in terms of addressing the threat of COVID to what we are seeing in many of the camps around the community, where people are literally just piled on top of each other in inhumane circumstances. So I believe it's important that we keep pushing forward. We are, in fact, meeting, and when I say we, it's a broad we, the county chair, Mark Jolin at the Joint Office of Homeless Services, many folks in the faith and philanthropic and nonprofit community, my colleagues on the city council, all of us are looking for alternative locations. I put the call out broadly to jurisdictional leaders, the school districts, the metro regional government, anybody we can think of who might have facilities that could potentially be used to bring people inside out of the elements. But you're right, we do absolutely have to concern ourselves with the realities of COVID.
Would the convention center be considered as a site?
It's currently being used as a COVID
right.
Vaccination site, so that is not currently on the table, but it has certainly come up, and there are other public facilities we're looking at as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Rebecca, one quick question and one quick answer, and we got to leave.
Yeah, sorry, I had a bunch. I wanted to follow up really quick on your discussion of evidence being brought to the DA. When you were on TOL the other week, it sounded like you were saying that PPB officers can't record any criminal destruction, either before, in the midst, after. Is that what's happening right now?
So here's what I think is the answer. Please do not take this to the bank. Run this by somebody else, particularly in our city legal department. I believe that the current rules allow the police to record, but only after a criminal act has taken place. In other words, the police can't go out there and record a demonstration, a peaceful, nonviolent demonstration. They're precluded from that. But if criminal activity starts, then I believe they are able to record once that criminal activity has begun to take place. But again, I would run that by our legal eagles.
And this is something, I'll run that by the city attorney, but this is something that changed after the court order related to that live streaming case?
So the live streaming case is interesting because it was only about live streaming. The police were not recording. They were truly live streaming. They were doing that for situational awareness so they could understand what was going on, what the dynamic of the crowd was, what the energy level was, where they were headed. And the judge ruled that the police should not have that capability. And so the police have to rely on other means.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It is time to go. We appreciate your patience, and we'll talk to you again later in the future. Take care.